So today we're going to dive into some of the ways that it broke from those traditions and the challenges that it presented, because, well, it sounds like it wasn't easy. To do that, I'm delighted to be joined by three of Deathloop's development team. We'll go from the end. Gameplay programmer Francesco Venco, campaign director Dana Nightingale, and co-creative director and studio director, I believe, Dinga Bakaba. So yeah, thanks for joining me, everyone. So let's start with that shift from the Dishonored games to Deathloop. How did you land on this, weird, ambitious project as your next thing, and why?
Well, I guess to some extent by accident. We like all best things. We were in some kind of transition period. The management at Arkane changed. As you said, at that point we had been doing a lot, like 3 Dishonored games, like 4 if you count the first game's DLCs. We like by accident and a number of different circumstances, we got the rare opportunity to do something crazy, like go for it, like make something original, crazy, and see what comes out of it. Which is, I guess not not that frequent. So presented with that opportunity, there's like a lot of things that go into what this became. But my personal, one of my personal goals, at least, was how do you say that? Well, that was my first game as a creative director, co-creative director with Sebastian. And I think I wanted to pay tribute to the immersive sims, and especially the Arkane immersive sims, but in general, this philosophy of games. And very intuitively, the way to pay tribute for me was to break the mold as much as possible, to try to somehow, surprise people enough to be able to make them question those games, why they like it, why they don't like it, fine. Somehow, a nice red circle on the core of those games and how much they can, how, in my opinion, how little they have to fit a rigid, blueprint. Mm-hmm. And then there was a lot of different things as well.
And I mean, that's things for you. Like, do you two have sort of anything to add about how you felt about the start of this project?
I joined the project when the blueprints were already laid out in the most roughest sense. But in the first thing, like my first day on Deathloop, and it was kind of funny because I was still a level designer at the time. My first day on the project was I go into the meeting room with my predecessor, Christophe Carrier, the former campaign director. Like, okay, we're working on the end of the game. We're working on how all of this comes together. And I think that day was probably the most fun that I had working in months and months and months, maybe even longer. Like because now I'm thinking about what would one of our previous games, one of the Dishonored games, be like if we just told the player, here are all your targets, you decide which ones you go after when. And I'm like totally like redesigning the Dishonored campaigns in my brain at this point. And I just dove right in. I'm like, okay, I've got the idea. I know what the final loop's going to be. Little did I know that this would become my job in about a year. So it was immediately exciting. It was kind of eye-opening also in the sense of like I had been doing level design for 10 years, 20 years if you count modding, and suddenly I'm fascinated by something new.
Francesco, what was your start on the project?
Well, it was a bit different for me because I joined the team in 2019. So I joined it directly for Deathloop, and Deathloop is pretty special for me because it was my first big game. And I really saw the metamorphosis of the code base in the years of production, because it was inheriting a lot of stuff from Dishonored. My entire team has been working on Dishonored for a pretty long time. A lot of veterans in the gameplay team, and it was an interesting process, because the game is very different from Dishonored, and so also the code had to evolve a lot from Dishonored. And it's a bit frustrating when you see online, oh, they just take Dishonored and they went from there. Actually, it's not like that at all, in the sense that, yes, a lot of systems are similar because it's our DNA, but so many things changed also in the code, which is invisible for the player, obviously. And slightly changes in the pace of the game can be very, very, how can I say, you can deal them only by changing the code completely sometimes, even if it's subtle for the player. For the code is a completely different strategy. Sometimes you need to apply the weapons, the powers, a lot of stuff. So for me, it was a very interesting and growing experience. But for the whole team, it was, even for the veterans, because the game just changed so much in the way we have to think gameplay.
I think a good example of the thing you're talking about there about, from the outside maybe it looks similar, but actually when you get your hands dirty, it's not all is the game's Nexus power, right? Which on the surface of it, again, I'm sure you've all played Deathloop, but is a power that allows you to sort of link the fates, right, of multiple NPCs, and that kind of builds on Dishonored 2's domino power, but as I understand it, both from sort of programming and design point of view, it's not as one-to-one as it might seem, right?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot to say on design too, because the old domino, you have to link one target at a time, while with Nexus we went with a big explosion linking everyone at the same time. It's a very good example, because at first, to prototype, we used basically Dishonored code with a few changes. I had to make it work for the replication stuff. I had to make sure it could work with multiple casters, because we have Colt, you have potentially Juliana player or Juliana NPC, you have the Harriet using it. But then the very first version, which was just the Dishonored power, made it work for a Deathloop context. It was just not good, because we were dealing with the problem of how do I connect all the networks created by different from the different players, different NPCs. And so we went up basically rewriting the entire code from scratch at some point, which is a very nice example on what I was saying, because it's, okay, apparently it's exactly the same thing. The design is slightly changed in a way that is a bit subtle maybe, but it's changed. And the code is not the same at all. And there was this moment where the two different version changed, and probably nobody really noticed during the playtest, because it was not really a common case where you could link yourself to a target and then Juliana would link that target to another target, things like that. But yeah, it was a completely new implementation and a long process. We had to redo it a couple of times, a lot of discussion between me, the designer, Dinga, and obviously all the artists involved, etc. And a lot of problems for just the networking was a bit of a challenge, because you need to rethink completely an algorithm and a structure that was made just for single player, one target only. And yeah, that's the perfect example on how something that is on the surface very similar in reality needed a lot of work, more work maybe than a power made from scratch for Deathloop.
And Francesco alluded to the sort of design changes there. Like, Dinga, can you speak to, let's stick talking about Nexus for now as a kind of microcosm, I guess, of this process?
Yeah, I mean, Francesco touched on it. The fact that, in Dishonored, when you're playing as Emily and you're using domino, you pick your target, and then the network is created, and then you do something. I think with Deathloop, because we wanted to do something a bit more, I guess, action-oriented. Like, if you look at Arkane games and you have like Ars Fatalis as the most RPG, and then you have Dark Messiah as the most action. We wanted Deathloop to be somewhere here. So due to that, the single-handedly picking targets made the power, I guess, less usable in combat. A good Dishonored 2 player can do that in real time, build their network as they're fighting with one hand. And then, but we wanted to make that accessible as well. So just use it as a smart bomb rather than as a cherry picking target. So that was one change, I guess. The other thing, which is it's odd because I'm not entirely sure we ever got to a point where it would have been a problem, but it's just the description of the power, and hence the, how do you call it, the mental model you create in the player's mind. In Dishonored, Domino's description would be link the fates of two people so that whatever happens to one happens to the other. But now we will be in a situation where, by accident, like what you say, because there is more than one caster possible, you will be linked with an enemy, and in that case, what happens if I heal? Do I heal them? So first instinct as a immersive sim designer, yes, yes, make the wrong choice possible, and then you're like, so initially we kept that, but we found that actually it could have been a bit overwhelming. It could have been a little bit, hey, I thought it would work like this. It doesn't, not being able to predict the results. So, and then, we, of course, someone started to say, hey, but what about this? What about that? Like all the states that the player can endure and NPCs can endure, are we translated all that, which led to the subtle change, but just saying that the power is about, transmitting harm, basically. Mm-hmm. It's not whatever happens to one happens to the other, which it is, when you hurt someone, it hurts the other. It sounds subtle, but actually it changes the system, changes how you understand the power. And I guess the other one, which is the other interesting design challenge, was the first time you meet Harriet, and you don't know what her power does, and she links you with another NPC, and you kill that NPC, and that damages you. How do we make that feel playful and not, what the fuck did just happen? Which is, it's a bit, but we did ask ourselves a lot of questions about how to really broadcast, because usually, again, you see the NPCs have a big glowing thing on their head, big glowing thing, a link. What about in first person when the enemy is, so thinking about how can the post process be warning you enough, like, hey, something bad is happening, but you can still see. Yeah, it's, as you can imagine, I'm sure a lot of people are grinding about it, but how did they do it? I will play it tonight. But it's been fun.
And that's, as you said, a sort of relatively subtle, right, change. The huge, one of the many huge things, I guess, is, Danny, you described walking into that meeting room and being like, here's the structure of the game. Like, was it, at that point, how much was it in place? Like, oh, this is what a time loop looks like in this game. Like, how did you land on, as a team, on the, on that structure?
Well, actually, I should maybe start.
Yes.
I'd say, so back to what I said in the beginning, like we wanted to make bring to the surface why those games are cool. Not just so. One thing to say about the immersive sims in general and Arkane games is we noticed like a very clear difference between the people who play those games once and the people who replay them once or twice. And that is because when we are creating the game, we are basically creating some, for a Dishonored game, it would be a linear series of little cubes of possibilities with a ton of things you can do in that cube. And then you move to this one, and there's a ton of things you can do. And when a player just makes their choices and progress to the story until the end, they traverse this 3D space in a, there is just one spline, traversing it. So you're only seeing your path. And there is two different types of players. There is the players who will infer, oh, there is all those other things that I could have done. That's cool. There is the players who will just say, oh, I guess that was okay. I don't understand why everyone is raving about it, but it was okay. And I remember one play test when one player said, "Yeah, it's kind of cool, but it's the most linear game I ever played." I was like, everyone was like heartbroken. But one of the things we wanted to do is, hey, how do we show to everyone the amount of flexibility the game has, but also selfishly the amount of love and care and little nuggets of joy that we put everywhere in those. And when I say everywhere, it's because I'm still keeping the idea of a space, but I mean the possibility space as well, not just the geographical space. So let's make people replay the game. So we started with, let's do something that is maybe a bit less long, but we are going to build a lot of familiarity with the spaces, the tools, the characters, so we can see all their facets and try different things. Of course, the first instinct was, let's make that meta game somehow, but that doesn't sit well with what the kind of games we do. It was weird to have that be non-diegetic. And again, if you made a story and at the end of the story you said, hey, you should go back and do all those things, some people would be done with it, actually. Actually, I'm the second type of players generally. Like I make my path. I'm very satisfied knowing that I could have done something else. But it really needs me to be in love with a game to replay it and see everything. So I think that that's where I started to scratch my head on how can we make that replayability diegetic, part of the entire thing. Like you will squeeze that lemon of possibility, and when you're done with it, you have seen more or less everything. Not everything, but at least a very good portion. And at some point, well, what about it's a story? First of all, it was what about it's a story that repeats? And it's part of it, and due to the fact that it's a story that repeats and you're doing changes. And then that's where it became special. It was, wait a minute. Let's make each increment part of a larger story and actually have a pretty traditional story in a world that is not traditional because time doesn't work like ours. And I'd say one of the interesting thing, and that's maybe a send-off for Dana, that one of the interesting things is, as I was personally thinking about it in the beginning, and the first people I was discussing it when it was like in the egg, I really saw it as you're playing through a Dishonored game, and instead of the game telling you, okay, now that you're done with, High Overseer Campbell, then you're going to go after the Pendleton twins. You get to choose where to go, and then at some point the players will figure out that's not possible actually, and then they will start to, try to break the game in a way. But the way I really envision it is you're playing traditionally one of our games, but instead of going to the next thing, you choose what the next thing is. And then you try a different path and a different path and a different path. And it was a challenge sometimes communicating this game because people would focus on how different it is structurally, while as a designer, the experience of playing through it is actually a certain form of, how do you call that? Continuity, I guess.
Kind of a fun thing about the progression of how we present the players' goals to them kind of mirrors how we did it throughout the entire Dishonored series and the way that evolved. Because the very first iteration of Dishonored, you're there to kill the targets. And oh, by the way, we have these little hidden secrets sprinkled into the game somewhere that can help you figure out the non-lethal way to kill the targets. And then we shouldn't have been surprised, but we were, that really resonated with players. And suddenly it's, oh, we have to present these non-lethal goals to the player. So as you're playing, eventually you can discover, oh, there's a non-lethal solution here. And then the game comes out and like 50-50, like we look at the achievements and the trophies, like which ending do people pick? Oh, it's 50-50 between the lethal and the non-lethal. So for Dishonored 2, now they're on equal footing. We present, as soon as you start the mission, you've got the lethal and the non-lethal. Now it's, all right, this is now shared. And then another iteration was in Death of the Outsider. Suddenly, there are villains who you can kill if you want, but all these other complicated goals, this is now your focus. So you go here, and now you're here to do this investigation, you're here to rob this bank, you're here to discover these secrets. So now in Deathloop, first iteration, you're here to kill these targets, and that's what the game is telling you. And if you sneak and you look around and you discover all these secrets, you can go, oh, wait a second, maybe I can break this time loop. So then, of course, we play test the game. That's the thing that players resonated with, like, oh, I want to break the time loop. This feels like an incredible goal. Next iteration of the game, now it's on equal footing. Now it's, you can go kill these targets, or you can investigate this stuff. Maybe you can discover something new. Again, everyone is gravitating towards the, I want to break the loop part. So the final version of the game is, yes, you can kill these targets. You eventually have to kill them all at the end. But your main goal is to discover all this weird stuff, and it's all about the mystery. And we're now making the discovery and the investigation the central player activity. This is now the main player-facing goal. And I think it's a little fascinating that we kind of redid our entire journey of like, what goals do we give to the player of the entire Dishonored series in the span of like 1 year on one project. But it I go into a lot more detail on this on my talk just after this, so I won't say too much.
We should all stay in the room.
It's right here,
by the way.
that entire process. But it, like I was saying when we first started, I was really compelled by the idea of this is the player creating their own campaign. They decide what's important to them. They decide, like, this is the character I'm really interested in. I want to go after them. Maybe I'll take care of this later. And that only works if the player has a really clear understanding of what their goals are, why they want to go here, what's important about this. Otherwise, they're just like clicking on maps and going out and like, I know there's something for me to do here, but I don't really know what it is. I'm going to stumble around a little bit and maybe I'll find the fun. And I never want the player to start off on that foot. I always want them to feel like, I'm going here for a reason. I know what the reason is. And if they discover something completely different while they're there, then that's awesome. But we always want to start the player off of like, this is what I'm choosing to do. The game is giving me all these options. This one is standing out to me. I'm going to go for that. And yeah, that was a huge change from like just structurally kind of looping back around to Dishonored is telling you, you're here to do this, and now you're here to do this, and it's always that linear sequence. And we just like, let's try something totally different now.
It's funny because I remember one playtester who basically said, "Hey, look, I understand the bullshit you're trying to build. That's fine. It's cool. It's really cool. But if you want me to be playful, if you want me to explore things and to make choices and to make mistakes and to really enjoy this, space of possibilities, tell me clearly what I have to do so I cannot do it."
Yes.
I think that was eye-opening.
Yeah.
I mean, part of me just wants to keep talking about the time loop structure for the entire time, and should we? I mean, how did you? One last thing, like, how did you land on like the specific, like, oh, it's four spaces, it's 4 time periods, and that like actual like firm structure up there.
So, mind you, that might be one of the, not the first, but that was one of the first thing that we. When we came up with it quite early, actually, it was one of the first things, actually, to be fair. And when we did, we started playing with, because of course, producers are like, that's 16 maps. You sure, dude? And and of course, we looked at it together, and and so we did the exercise. What about? So first of all, in the beginning, it was not 4 time of days. It was indeed 4 periods, 4 environments that we started with that. weirdly, I prefer odd numbers, but for some reason that's 4 did come from on this one. And so we tried. What about one more? Because in the beginning it was not time of days; it was days actually. You know, it was you have 4 days, and at the end of the 4th day, the week restarts. And for a number of reasons, we compressed it, but we still, questioned it. What about one more day and one less period? What about one less period, one more, one less? So we did poke a little bit at it, but what we found is that the exercise of just the exercise of doing that, of taking all your crazy, it's not even a flow chart. It's a forest of flow charts that actually represent the structure of the game. And when you take that and you start like moving things, like one less period, one more period, one less area, it was just overwhelming. So we said, look, maybe this is a mistake, but that's what we are doing. Because if we keep changing our mind on that one, we will never get anywhere. So it was like one of the first temples. I don't want to hear anything about adding, removing a place or adding, removing a time period. And, makes you seem like the bad guy sometimes. But in this case, it was really clearly, I think, one of the things that helps. Sometimes, instead of, there is an Arabic proverb that if you want to find water, you should not dig a hole in 10 places. You should pick one place and dig 10, 10 equivalents of depth. And that was the case. Maybe it's not the right place, but we'll find the fun somewhere in there. So I think that was important. And I think that I would say that the interesting thing was for this structure, how to because another creative goal. We wanted the player extremely confused in the beginning. If that happened to you, it's not by accident. So we wanted the player extremely confused in the beginning because Colt, the protagonist, is extremely confused, and we liked to align those two. And at some point, we wanted both Colt and the player to feel like they are the master of time and space and possibilities, and they are, we like to say, a superpower John Wick that controls time on top of that. Like it's, you in the beginning you're enduring this structure somehow, and you have all your game standards coming back to you. This is probably a roguelike, and or is this a puzzle game? Or so you start, trying to find something, gravitate to something, and grok it. And at some point, you kind of give up. You embrace what it is, and when you do, playtesters. Well, sometimes it was painful to get there, but playtesters got some kind of epiphany. And when that happens, that joy, that's something that every change and tweak and improvement to that structure was preserve how confused we are in the beginning, make sure the epiphany comes early enough, and that it's powerful enough, and and make sure that that will be weird to say in terms of game design, but make sure they don't want to stay in your world too long, because that's not the theme of the game. The theme of the game is to break the loop, to end it, to this is not life. This is not. I need to move on to something else. And because of that, we wanted to get to the point where you have this moment where you feel all powerful and almighty and super cool and smart, like making the player feel smart. That's super hard, actually. And
especially if the player is me.
Actually, it's worse. The smarter the players are, the more difficult it is to make them feel smart. Actually, that's something I found in the playtest.
Oh yeah.
But but when you get there, we don't want to, we want to still make you go, yeah, this is, like Colt, this is a limited space, actually. I'm the master of it. I'm all powerful, like Juliana, and Juliana makes the choice to stay in that over and over for her own reasons. But because we wanted Colt to be the one that is the ultimate party pooper, we needed the player to get to this point where all this fun, all this, choices and possibilities and power, I'm going to give that up because, that's what you do when you end the game, well, the kind of meta thing is that definitely we do prefer games that end. No offense to anyone working on a continuous game, but that was part of the things we wanted to look at. Like, how do you get to the point where you decide, as a player, I'm done with this. Not only because the story gets you there, but because you decide, now I'm ending it. And I think that was interesting to reach that point.
And I guess kind of complicating that feeling of like, oh, I'm done, I'm ready to sort of move on. Like, is the fact there's multiplayer, right? Which is the other big change, the other big shift. I mean, Francesco, you kind of touched when we were talking about Nexus on how that makes everything more complicated. But can you talk about how that changes the way you work?
Well, actually, Nexus, obviously, multiplayer adds complexity, but it was not maybe the worst one. Short, fun story. Before joining Arkane, I made a few prototypes of multiplayer games for the small company I was working for. So when I joined Arkane, I said, yes, I'm going to do nice single-player games. Actually, we're doing a multiplayer game. The thing is, the multiplayer for the programming side is obviously, or the networking part, or the actual, connection between the peers and stuff. But there is also a complete shift in a way you think what you do, because you have the first-person player, you have the third-person player that is replicated. They are like two separated worlds that have to somehow synchronize, and the entire team has to rethink how they approach to gameplay programming. And very, very simple, very stupid example is how you deal with weapons and the bullets and the raycast from weapons. You want to be instant on your client because you want to have a feedback, you want to see blood if you hit, you want to see a small reaction from the animation. But then you have to replicate it then on the other side, and you want to be sure that the effects are synchronized with the animation, for example. And you do not want it to be too late. You do not want it to be too early. And it's not rocket science. It's something games have been doing for years. But when you have a team that is doing it for the first time, well, it is a challenge. And also you have so many things to do, so many things to make work, that maybe some little teeny details say, okay, I'll fix it later because I do not have time to do it now. One example is exactly this synchronization of the hits of the weapon and the animation. And then you are very late in development and you realize, okay, I never fixed it. Now I must do it before the game ship. And there was a lot of effort from the entire team to make it work smoothly. I think that we are not the perfect multiplayer game, we know that, but I'm very happy how fun it is, finally, and how fun the encounters can be. And as a team, we are very proud to say, okay, we made it, and the game is enjoyable, and we learned so much during the process. And that's probably the most rewarding thing in the end, when you make other people have fun, and you also learn as a professionist, as a programmer, as a team in the process.
And yeah, as the first time, as the team who did it for the first time, how did it feel? Like, what were the design challenges? I mean, that's a good question, right?
My design challenge was often to find a way to cordon off some of the more deep story content away from the multiplayer. So like never the two shall meet, because the player has to meet this character and this needs to be a scene with a certain tone. You have to like take away the player's controls for like a minute and a half. We tried to keep them very short. And suddenly it's, okay, so this can only happen, like big open possibility space. The player may want to do this at multiple times in multiple locations. This can only happen here and here. Now we have to justify it in fiction. We have to justify it in the level design. We have to make it readable and intelligible that this event can only happen here at this time, only because we can't allow it to happen here at this time because there could be an invading player. And now we're making a ton of new design challenges for ourselves, and we have to hide it. We don't want a player to ever think, Like, I want to complete my goal during the morning period instead of the afternoon. Like, why isn't the game letting me? Clear why the game is letting you. But the thing that's clear to the player is actually the lie. The truth is we can't let you do that because there could be an invader here and that would mess the whole thing up. So like every time we had story content like that, the first puzzle was, how do we make this work around the multiplayer? Sometimes we lock the player into a room. We were just like, okay, if there's an invader right now, they're just going to have to wait because the player is in the safe little box where they're talking to this other character, and like they could be bunny hopping outside of the door for all we know. It just doesn't really matter. But then Colt could just hide in there forever, technically. But it was a constant. It's weird because my entire relationship with the multiplayer aspect of the game was kind of designing around it. But that, you know, you work the challenges that you're given.
Yeah, it's fun. It touches on one of the main thing. Without going into detail, I would say that the multiplayer was both, well, first, it didn't start. The game didn't start with this like invader mechanic, actually. You know, the target of, I mean, the character of Juliana existed. I think she was called Juliana already, but anyhow, you know, she existed, and her whole purpose in the beginning was, you know, this is a clockwork, and you know where every piece is. So in a brainstorm, because we have a design filter that's called break the pattern for our games. So someone said, hey, break the pattern. Let's make one of the targets. You never know where she is. So actually, when you get to breaking the loop, the goal was to corner her somewhere by doing something. And so we started calling her the hunter, and you know, it started to be cool. And then of course, someone at the brainstorm say, hey, so yeah, I guess with AI we can make her cool, but what about if she's like really, like if she is the element of surprise, of unexpected, of chaos, the one thing that never happens in one of our games before, which is actually your perfectly laid plan, you know, can be invalidated, and you know, and we are creating now you're creating a situation around it. That's a story you didn't opt in for, but it's now happening. So in order to create that, what about if it's a player actually? And of course we laugh in the brainstorm. I go, yeah, that would be cool, sure. And for some reason, actually, I don't know, I'm not entirely sure exactly how, but it happened. Actually, that's one of the weird things, like the turning point from it's a joke to it's actually happening. And that's the part that is a bit blurry in my mind, actually, mind you.
I'm pretty sure at some point someone said, but the crossing.
Yeah, but the crossing. Yeah, actually, that's true. That's probably what, you know. But I think one important thing is when that happens, of course, suddenly it was super important. You cannot go, even if you're saying that's not what the game is exactly about, due to all the technical challenges, due to all the design challenges, it cannot be this little thing, you know, actually. So suddenly the game was not, you know, her character became more and more important as to be as important, if not more important than Colt, actually, in my opinion. She's the most interesting character in the game. I think that was really interesting, seeing that, you know, take shape progressively, her being front and center. And but the same way, when you say, okay, if we do it, we go all the way, you probably overdo it, which we did, of course. So I think a lot of the interesting part and where we actually got Deathloop to be what it is now was balancing, you know, setting the right balance between the familiar, it's an Arkane game with a twist, that's what we wanted, and it's a completely new thing. And that was not the easiest thing to find, and you know, a lot of the things that Dana touched on, which is how does that interact with that? Remember that other goal. It's a story. It's not, you know, metagame. How does that interact? And then making sure that the character's motivation, because, you know, I mentioned if you're playing the single player campaign, you want to end it, you know, and we want to get you in that space. But actually, Juliana, her character, she has reasons why she wants this to continue. And the only reason why it's fun is because there is a cult. There is this person that is trying to break this loop, which he makes the entire eternity actually fun and surprising. And well, when he's not surprising, he's boring and she hates him. But what she really wants is for him to be interesting, and she wants him to be there because when he, well, in the story, again, the same way we wanted to align cults and the player's motivation to play through the campaign and break the loop, we wanted to align the Juliana's players' motivations and the characters as to why this is fun and why I might be doing that over and over and over until there is no cult, which is, again, a bit meta, but that's what happens to games, multiplayer games.
So sort of taking, I guess, a step back and from you know, the sort of, again, getting hands dirty challenges that we're talking about, like the big shifts that we're talking about and the challenges that sort of originated from them. I mean, presumably that's a bit scary, right? Like in the studio, was there any skepticism? Was there any resistance to like doing these things that you hadn't done before, or that maybe no one had done before?
I'll start. Yeah, you bet. Of course, it would be surprising if it was not the case. Like I think it would be weird if it wasn't the case. So, few things we did. Well, first of all, I think one thing I did say to the team quite early is, look, we have the rare chance to do something weird and unique with a AAA budget. And that doesn't happen that often, correct? Yeah, correct. So when that happens, like let's seize the opportunity. Clearly, I chose, to not try to bullshit the team. I said clearly this is something that some people will hate profoundly, but I hope that this is something that some other people will love profoundly, and very little of in the middle. That was the goal. Make something polarizing, unique. Like actually, my PR and marketing friends joked to me because in the lead up to Deathloop, in an interview, I said this is we are making cuisine and not fast food, so you might not like it. And they said that's not something you'd say to players. And I was like, well, I don't want to sell it to someone who will hate it, honestly. So. But yeah, I think saying that to the team, look, this is something that some people will love, some people will hate. Maybe you're in the second category, but we need to all come together to make the experience as good as possible for the people who will love it. So let's try to understand who they are, because they are not just Dinga, I hope. So let's try to understand who they are, what they need, what they want, and try to solve their problems rather than try to make something that everyone will absolutely love. And that was, I think that was a healthy dialogue. How do we make that one weird thing good? Whether if it's a bad choice, it's my fault. Don't worry, it's not your fault. And the other thing, because I think it would be, and it was actually very hard for the design team to be holding on that, to be the keepers of that vision. And it was hard for them. So really super proud of the design team on that. One thing we did is again, to understand what what this player who will love the game, who they are, etc., and to avoid the kind of messiah in the desert thing, like follow me, there is water. Like I really didn't want to be that kind of director, and Sebastian either. So what we did is we did involve some analysts, you know, and we chose the harshest, meanest analysts. So they're called Agro Consulting. They're French, but they well, I should stop there. They're French. But I mean, they are journalists from very well respected, they're former journalists, and they are mean. They are very, very harsh, but extremely smart. And when they will make a report for you, they will spend most of it telling you how much your game is crap, in very, frustratingly, in very smart and articulated and you know, informed ways. But they will also tell you why it matters and why you should make an effort to make it less crap. I think they are great partners. So if you have any chance to work with them, please do. It's an experience. Buckle up. But you know, it will be good. So what we did is actually we made them come to consult with us at several stages of the project. At the say, concept phase, actually, there was nothing playable the first time they came. Vertical slice, somewhere before alpha, somewhere after alpha. And each time we were transparent, even though it was kind of scary, we were transparent with the team with how much, you know, with all they said. Because I think the first eye-opening thing for the team was when, you know, you're worried about, you know, again like skepticism and stuff, and suddenly you have someone that you know, we know them, like, again, they are super harsh, and they will come and say, blah, 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 all these things is wrong. But wow, this game is special because blah, 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 blah. So make sure you don't lose that, and make sure that you find a way to surface this, and make sure that, I think it was very healthy for the team. I guess that when I asked them, like, how many studios you work with actually share your reports with the team, they said 5% maximum. Because again, you know, as a I guess a director, it's it can feel, I guess, you can feel threatened by having someone, you know, saying to your team how bad your game is in a way. But again, since it's constructive, I think it was really reassuring for the team that, okay, there is something special here. And again, it kept the conversation about, you know, succeeded in what the game is trying to do, rather than making what we are trying to do into something that will be extremely successful, which, you know, you have to make a choice there, I guess. Yeah, so,
sometimes I would try to give kind of a gallows humor pep talk to some of my fellow level designers, where they're stressed, they're doubting, they're like, what if the game's a failure? And I would say to them, you can do everything right. You can make the perfect game that ticks every box. You can make the exact game that you think will just blow everyone away and still fail. Wouldn't you rather fail spectacularly doing something ridiculous? And it's like it's not the most intuitive pep talk, but it would kind of be like, yeah, let's go.
When you Google pep talk, it's not the first thing that comes up.
No, but you know, you kind of like we're not in our comfort zone right now, but that's the point. We're here to take risks and do weird things. Some people never get this opportunity in their whole career to make something this ridiculous, and it was a challenge for a lot of folks, because they had their idea of what they wanted to make, especially like, you know, coming to Arkane. It's like, I want to make Dishonored maps, and now we're telling them like, sorry, you can't hide under tables in this game. Like, you're not, you know, there isn't a pacifist run. There isn't any of these things. And in some cases, like, there was a lot of momentum behind what they wanted to do. And they would be getting increasingly frustrated with, like, I want my map to work like this. I want the player to be able to do these things. And you're telling me, no, I don't believe in this game right now. And say, okay, let me try to get you on board with the things that are exciting that you can be doing in your level design that you're not doing yet, and try to like say, okay, let's work together on this to help you find like the heart and soul of this game so you can get your passion back for this work. And little by little, one by one, like everyone came around, but it was a journey in some cases, and like some people can be very stubborn, especially like really talented, smart, dedicated people. They can be a bit stubborn.
Even programmers.
Yeah.
Yes, because
programmers stubborn. Why?
they can be. Oh, surprise. But there were moments where there was a lot of skepticism in the gameplay team. But there is something that I think must be said to credit of my colleagues, that everyone always kept to giving their best, even when people were not. Okay, I'm not sure. I see where this game is going, but okay, I'll try to do my best to make this feature work, to make it work the best way possible, and it paid out finally. And when we were at the last data stages, and finally we could see the game in its form, its entirety, and it was just clicking for everybody. That thing was meant to work this way because there is this other thing. And it was a very, I think there was a specific playtest, a specific moment where the entire studio felt relieved because it works.
Yeah, it's this case of you know, how can I say that? You can tell people to make them love what they are doing. You can tell them and try to convince them and trick them into believing they love it. But that's not necessarily the case. So letting them be true to themselves, I don't love it yet. The day they love it, you know it's sincere. That's the thing. When that happened, you know, when we got to the point where I felt, and it's cool because it was, yeah, there was a turning point, of course, like all Arkane games the same. By the way, to an extent, this game is weird, but at the same time, we always go through this version of this journey. Immersive sims are utter shit until they are not. And that's usually late. You know, and you know, of course, some people are sometimes cynical about it. Yeah, probably that's because of crunch. Well, guess what? We didn't crunch on this one, so it's not that. It's really the case. Like it's a lot of you know, it's a lot of interlocked systems, and because of that, before you have a certain version of the complete picture, it's hard to even know what it is. And then when you do that, you have a picture of what it is, but you mainly see what it is not, which is fun. It is functioning, it has a shape, but it's still crap. And you have to still work on it to actually make it good. So it's a journey. Those games are not easy to make. That's a given. But again, I think that letting people own their doubts and own their you know, their anxiety, and then again progressively. You know, I think Sébastien, if he was here, Sébastien Mitton, art director and co-creative director, if he was here, he would say one of the moments that clicked for me was, you know, when at some point I sent him, hey, look at what the narrative team is writing, and that was like a bunch of those Colt and Juliana radio calls. Like I sent him 10 of them, and he laughed to every single one of them. And he came back to me and said, that's super cool. Like, wow, the entire team needs to know that this is that cool. Like, this is, you know, and so, you know, for some of us, it started with, we started to like the characters. We started to like the tone. We started to like the art style. We started to like, oh, I like this shotgun, you know, like, yeah. So a lot of games, a lot of action games rely on a good shotgun. But I guess it was our first shotgun, so it was scary. But, you know, I'm starting to like, you know, this environment, this music, this piece of music. And at some point, yeah, I guess this is actually pretty interesting. But it was progressive. And because of that, I guess the fun part is, you know, for all those moments where we as designers and some of the, you know, felt a bit, it's really hard to go against the tide and stuff. I have to say the moment where we had the entire team rooting for the game, when we got it to previews and seeing, you know, everyone like bursting honest joy when we got good reviews, and you know, like it was. I think it was definitely you know. Well, my first big game, which is Dishonored, like of course, the success brought me a lot of joy, you know, being part of that team. But I think this time, you know, how can I say that? The amount at which some of us, you know, enjoy the every praise to the game and also every bit of hate. Because that's what we were doing. We were doing something that people would hate with passion. And each time someone hates it with passion, we also consider that a victory. Like, yeah, that's what we set out to do. So it's, you know, it's been a very satisfying year, if I'm honest.
I mean, there's 1,000 of things I want to see, but I'm aware of time. Should we? Sorry, make decisions out loud here.
Questions?
Yeah, should we open it to questions to the floor? We have a microphone. Good, great.
I'm already set up for my talk, so we can
yeah, and just to be clear, you were all staying here, right, for Data's talk after this. So you know,
there's a 15-minute intermission. We can cut into that, I think.
So just a quick one, really. I'm interested to know the consultancy firm that you work with, the guys that were quite tough. Did they give you anything towards the back end of the game when you pretty much finished, and did they report on what they felt about it at that time, just before release? And how did you handle that moment as well, if they did something?
Spoilers for my talk.
I will not spoil the alpha stuff. No, I guess a bit later, yes. There is some things they did, yeah, indeed, alert us on, you know, that we couldn't entirely solve. So that's the thing. You need, each time you need to look at what you would get out of it, and you need to, because I think it wouldn't have been healthy to not do anything for the team. You know, like we read this, now it's on the back of our mind. We're going to stress until launch. So sometime doing a small tweak, a few small tweaks, and that's not easy because, again, as you say, it's toward the end. So what you need to do is find a champion for that in the team. You know, it cannot be a lead. You need to find some. Well, it can be a lead in some cases, but you need to. It doesn't have to. Is what I mean. You need to find a champion in the team who says, "Yeah, I really care about doing something. I will sit down with a producer, with an artist, a programmer, whoever needs to be there, and I will find the most cost-efficient little step that I can do to feel like I did my best effort to actually take this feedback, even if it comes late." And of course, in some cases, taking the time to make your best effort results in we are not doing anything actually, which is fine. I think it's fine. But I think it's it would be, in my opinion, depending on what you're trying to do, of course, and your team culture, etc., etc. I think it would be a mistake to just say, starting at some point, I will not even mention this to the team, for instance. Let's put it out there. If we can assemble around, you know, a reaction, then let's. And yeah, in some cases it's subtle, and maybe it doesn't really steer the feedback as you want it to. But in the back of your mind, you're like, yeah, but if we didn't do anything, maybe it would have been even worse. You see what I mean? So, you know, just.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thanks for a very inspiring keynote. It was very cool to listen to. Being a programmer myself, I have a boring technical question. Yeah. So, because at the moment, we're also working on a multiplayer title, and I'm always coming back in my head and wondering, when you're working on a new system or a feature, you know, the balance between, oh, this is fine as a first pass, and we can fix it later, versus, you know what, we should probably really invest to get this down right originally. I'm wondering if there are any lessons that were discovered that you could share?
Oh gosh, very tough question. It depends a lot on the feature. I think that my answer would be make a working prototype first, because you don't know if you are keeping a feature, if you are changing it. So make sure you have something dirty and quick that work, and it must work in multiplayer right away, so you can test it. And then when you do a second iteration, try to make it right immediately. As long as you say, okay, the design is stable, try to think of the problems right away, because most of the time, sometimes you're lucky and okay, just minor fixes and tweaks and it's going to be good. Other times you'll have to rewrite it from scratch because the solution you found is not working well in multiplayer. And so you lose more time because you have to do it a second time. So quick prototype, no matter what, and then try to make it right. And it's not going to ensure you that you do not need to write it a third or fourth time, because sometimes shit happens. But try really to play in advance. That's what I would suggest. It's not something you can apply to all the cases, obviously, so it's really difficult to give a general answer, but that would be my take.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Nice one, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, so obviously Deathloop has a lot of stealth elements, and the enemy AI, there's an understanding when it comes to stealth games that it needs to be somewhat simple because the player needs to be able to abuse it. My question is, how do you go about improving over time from Dishonored your enemy AI without making it so complex that, again, the player doesn't abuse it?
Well, actually, this time we didn't have the choice because of the multiplayer. We just couldn't possibly make it as complex as the one in Dishonored 2, could we?
One thing that helped is a lot of our enemies are very obviously idiots. So just the barks lead, like some of this, like the ridiculous AI behavior really worked, because you hear these folks just bumbling around and like they don't know what they're doing. So it worked. We could actually like simplify the AI even more.
Yeah, actually, it's it's a weird it's a weird case, because this is not a military game. This is not trained guards and stuff. This is a bunch of cultists that got enrolled in this, in this cult, and one day people, tell them, hey, there is this rebel, take a weapon and no fun until you have stopped him. And they're like, oh, that's what I'm doing, I guess. So I think that's part of it. And also in this case, I guess, well, to varying level of success, but what we wanted for this AI, we didn't want, like in Dishonored, the guards are supposed to be a very significant thing. Here, in the beginning, they are, because you're very aware of your fragility in Deathloop in the beginning, because there is no quick save, quick load, which makes you, even if the game isn't harder, that makes you feel immediately more vulnerable than a Dishonored or a Prey or a Skyrim or a Sniper Elite, which I love. And because you feel much more, vulnerable in the beginning, but you get, as I said, we wanted you to feel at some point very powerful. And, we had all this puzzle that you need to solve and figure out and have fun with. And, at some point, the game is more about solving a puzzle and making an investigation than a stealth challenge. So we wanted the NPCs to go from being a bit threatening in the beginning, you're worried, to they are just breadcrumbs along the way for me to express my creativity in avoiding them, killing them, doing some crazy combinations and be creative with them. They are chips, basically. So due to that, here in this case, good AI was making them stupid enough that you can feel extremely powerful by the mid-game. but not too stupid that it would feel broken, which again, we did our best. It's not actually making a dumb AI is probably harder. Actually, there was a great panel yesterday where the presenter said to make a good AI, just give them more hit points, because people will feel that they are smarter because they survive longer and they can see more of their behaviors. Well, we didn't have this option, because if we did that, that would be, fighting against the goals of the game. So now, again, I don't want to, actually in the talk yesterday, there was a lot of good points. If it was not that, going from Dishonored 2 and going to another single player game, if we wanted to improve something, I guess making it even more reliable. If you have a good system that you're not redoing from scratch, supporting more and more and more edge cases, because don't support all the edge cases, the first iteration of the system, don't ever. But if you're comfortable, if your system works, start supporting some of those edge cases that will happen 3 times in a playthrough, but when that happens, it's magic, make sure that you have the right box for it, make sure that you have assets and, animations and fiction to support them, and make sure they are unique. Don't just play catch up with other great games. Try to find some things that, due to your fiction, will happen only in your game. So I have an example for Dishonored 1, which is we had those walls of light. It's like a portal that is not physical. It's just like when you cross, it will disintegrate you. And we had a mechanic where we wanted the player to feel smart when they hack it, but we didn't want the NPCs to be just lemmings going into it and dying. So what we are doing is we had the first NPC of a squad, when you hack it, run toward it and die. And in the beginning, the players were like, yeah, the NPC is dumb, and they were not registering it. But then we made it so that when that happens, the other one barks, hey, don't, you're going to, and then they fry. And immediately, NPCs feel smart. But again, this is something that happens in our game, because the portal, you cannot tell that it's that the door is not closed, so to speak, because it's a door. So finding the little unique things that will work with your fiction and your world and your characters is sometimes, I think, more important than just playing catch up with Metal Gear or with a Hitman.
Cool. And I think that's all we have time for. For more hot Deathloop action, literally hot, stick around for Dana's talk, going into one of those, as alluded to, big, late in the game, is it fair to say, changes?
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for joining me, Francesco, Dinga, and Dana. It's been, I hope you've all had fun. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.